And what's going on, chat? How are y'all doing today? Did I see you hit 50? I was like, last I looked, you're at 49.
I am 49.
Still 49. That's fantastic.
49 and a half.
In less than a week, as well as continuing to play some Final Fantasy 14 this week. You've made a
P9 clear.
What's up?
I almost saw P9 clear.
Oh, how what percentage?
Well, so there's one big mechanic that is the wiper of the party, and I saw to the end of the mechanic, and then we couldn't repeat it. So like once you get past the Levin strike, my understanding is the remainder of the fight just kind of falls over. There's not like a big DPS check or anything like that. Like you just need to get past Levin strike,
Makes sense.
which I have not been able to do.
All right, well, making progress at least.
But I've just been party finding it, so which means every single group you join needs more help with Levin strike.
Okay.
Basically, it comes up with there's 8 things to do, and you are going to be assigned one of those 8, and then you're going to have like kind of a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and at least one of those steps you have the opportunity to wipe the entire raid.
Yeah,
and so everybody needs to know all 8 positions, and all 8 positions they need to be able to solve for step 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if they make any mistakes, everybody dies. And so that's why Party Finder struggles, is because if you make one mistake out of one of the 4 phases, every 8th pull, we never make it, right? If we all do that, if we all just take turns wiping the party, you'll never see past it.
Okay.
But we're pretty cleanly I'm getting in groups now that we're getting to limit cut every time.
Yeah.
So we're seeing it more often, and like gear will help with that, because what'll happen is you'll go into limit cut with more healthy players, more focused players. You'll get there more pulls in a row.
Yeah.
And the post, like they're saying right now, like what I've been told is after I get past that, the fight is beatable, but like it's going to become really easy as gear gets better once you get past it to kind of make it through the end.
Okay. Roger that. Very cool. So on that note, shifting over into how's been your Diablo experience so far this week? I know we've talked about it. We were playing a little Call of Duty on Wednesday. Surprise, surprise, I showed up.
Every time I play this game, I want to play it more.
Yeah. What is it about it that you feel like continues to draw you back in? Because I've heard so many people who were like on the fence, and that's such the best kind of game to release. People were on the fence, kind of skeptical, and then the game comes out, and then it's like, oh man, this is either what I was wanting, or it has addressed the kind of concern. What do you think?
I think the world exploration really baits you into like the just one more thing mentality, which is a very like Diablo way of thinking. Like if I just do one more meth run, I'll get the drop I need. So I think the world exploration is really cool. They've built it in such a way where progressing alts is going to be trivial, which I think is where a Diablo game shines. Like it's really fun to explore all this once. You don't want to then have to do it again and again and again and again. So like that's going to encourage people to play multiple classes. And the fact that I'm not locked into my class for the season unless I want to make this my main game feels really nice. The story is unbelievable. It's the cutscene quality, the voice acting is so good.
Yeah.
And that's just not something I've ever expected from this genre.
I think one of the things that brings that up, though, because I felt like, for the time, Diablo's cutscenes have always been really like, well done. These are Blizzard cutscenes. And then as time has progressed, the game visuals with Diablo 4 and the cutscenes, they feel very connected. It all feels very cohesive, where Diablo 3 was a little bit more light. And that's something that people called out, in the graphic style as a part of it. But that's what a lot of people maybe were first introduced with Diablo. Diablo 4 kind of goes back more to its roots, like Diablo 2, darker, more medieval. But now we're seeing the in-game engine graphics then tie right into the visuals and the cutscenes. And so I don't feel like I'm being pulled out as much, where like if you remember like Final Fantasy VII, which is a great topic that we can talk about today, Final Fantasy VII, like they sold it on the cutscenes, right? The graphics of the cutscenes. The game overall was gorgeous, but looking back at it now, you can see a vast difference from gameplay cutscene, where now as we're getting into it, like it's very, very blended, very, very cohesive. And I feel like that's what Diablo 4 has been able to deliver. I almost called it an expansion, but with this release. What else outside of the story? Like, you've been playing the sorceress. Do you have a game plan to level up any alts? Because you said that
I didn't, but like now it feels like the game's kind of like made that something that, if I have a friend that wants to switch classes or something, like I could very easily hop over, because my alt would already be kind of a little bit of a god mode.
Yeah.
And that's only going to be more the case. Like as I unlock even more stuff, I'm going to get to where like my alts are just going to be these ridiculously powerful things. Because you carry stuff with you. They're going to have 10 potions on the bar. They're going to start with 13 skill points at level 1 out of the 62 that you get. Like every time they want to upgrade anything, they're going to upgrade everything fully automatically because I'm going to have unlimited resources. So like it just feels like, why would you not play an alt if you have a reason to? As of right now, like I think it's better off to just progress my main. So I'm enjoying. I'm wrapping up Act 3 probably right after this call. I thought I would wrap it up right before, and so Act 3 will wrap up, and there's 6 acts, I believe, over 5 zones. So I'm just focusing on that right now. But yeah. I think like for me, Diablo has been a great game to play casually in addition to other games. Focus on one class, and then if you want to play a different class, wait for the next season, and then pick up that other class. Then has always been kind of how it's been easiest for me to consume, so that I can kind of keep up with my friends who maybe do keep multiple classes geared. But they play a lot more than me. But now it's like, well, I don't think it'd be that hard to catch them. I think that as soon as I have a complete map, all of my skill points and potions transfer. So, that part being account wide is really, really great.
Yeah, I feel you there. One of the things I want to ask you about, especially as he talks about kind of the monetization of how Diablo 4 is structured, it's, buy to play. You then have the optional battle pass that is essentially going to roll out with the different seasons. But they've already confirmed expansions are a big part of the game plan. What do you feel would be the right kind of cadence for the expansion culture within Diablo 4 to really make it a game that doesn't necessarily become kind of back in the mind, becomes more of the like, oh, this is the, whether you take part in the seasons, kind of that at all, but where like you and I are like, guys, it's June is Diablo season. What kind of cadence do you feel like from an expansion mindset? Because that usually has the biggest way to draw in the most people back to a game. What kind of cadence are you thinking?
Every 2 to 4 seasons, and then it depends on what an expansion entails.
Yeah.
Does it add a new class? Does it add new skill trees to existing classes? Do we change the way affixes work? Do we add something new like rune words? Do we add a new zone? Do we add additional modes? So like it just depends on like how big that word expansion is, because it's already a seasonal model. So we're already hitting reset like 4 times a year. So I would sync it with one of those. I wouldn't go every time, but like I think every 2 would be pretty freaking often, and less often than every 4 might start to feel like, well, how big do they have to be worth it? Because you're already expecting me to come back for these seasons. Like, I don't know what all gets put in the season. It's the same question I have for New World. Like, what's the difference between a seasonal reset and an expansion reset? And that's just a cadence that you have to kind of figure out which is which, as opposed to more standardized MMOs. They don't call those seasons. So like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy call those patches and expansions. And so there's a very clear line between the two.
Yeah.
But like with PoE 2 on the horizon, Diablo 4 needs to really like cement its space, or like they're just going to give up market share to PoE 2 when it comes out. So like that's their job, right? If their job is to sell games and keep people in their ecosystem, they are competing directly with Path of Exiles 2, which is slated for some time next year.
Okay, so they at least have a year to build up and then, release an expansion. I think the best kind of cadence when we start to think about how games that we generally talk about a lot happen, You end up seeing, like, I wouldn't go more than 2 years for an expansion, because you're right. How much content does that entail? However, if they're able to hit like an expansion a year, it's like a yearly check-in with the game in terms of like for example, like, does an expansion need to have 3 classes? No. Well, maybe if they went every 2 years, like putting in more content for that makes sense. But does it make more sense to have that yearly expansion where it's like, hey, we've added a new class? Because that's one of the things that I think people who have their favorite class within Diablo haven't yet seen it, because this is kind of them going back to the roots of Diablo 2, which I agree with. I love the class selection that we have here is phenomenal. Would I like a paladin? Absolutely. But we'll get there. But imagine if like next year, it's like, instead of like having it to be, like you said, like massive, they're able to tell like more of these kind of like milestone stories that ends up being kind of that check-in. And then you end up selling, obviously, the seasonal passes that kind of, for the hardcore players, for the players who don't want to stop, who want to just keep pressing on. And then essentially you've built this kind of playground that you're able to expand on yearly with enough content to kind of fill in the gaps where people will dip out. Well, people will take breaks, but then they'll able to sit back and overall have a really good time. So that's where it's like, it'll be interesting to see in the life of what we have here. The thing I absolutely adore about it is I've been running it primarily on Steam Deck, because that's where I get to spend most of my time gaming. So it's been very comfortable for me to kind of kick back, relax, and play, be able to jump in with others. And then I'm debating on if I want to go ahead and pick up the game on Xbox, but that ties into the will they, won't they, Microsoft acquire Activision Blizzard. Like I'm kind of waiting to see, because I would hate, like, I've already purchased the game, so I feel like I'm financially like, yep, you've gotten my money. I don't want to just give it to you, especially if it ends up being a game that comes to Game Pass once that acquisition is completed. So that's where I kind of stand on the, like, I wouldn't mind picking it up on Xbox, just to sit back and have another place to play it. But those are my thoughts. Any thoughts you have?
Would your wife play with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think before the acquisition came through and all that stuff rolled out, because it wouldn't be like, hey, we announced the acquisition is going through. Okay, the next day all that stuff is in.
Oh, it's all here.
Take a long time.
It still take a time. Yeah,
I will tell you that, like, my brother's been playing with his wife, and he says that it is the single best, like, AAA quality couch co-op game he has had in years.
Yeah.
He's like,
well, and the fact that it is couch co-op on Xbox and still connected and online, it's not like you're off in this own version of the game, because that's the thing that would have just absolutely become an easy deal breaker. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to really invest in another character, another account.
You just log in. Yeah. You just log in. So if I went out to visit him, I could try the couch co-op, sit down at his Xbox with him,
and bring on your character. Right.
And I could bring my character. His wife has a character but doesn't own the game, because she just plays on their Xbox, and the purchase is tied to his Battle.net account.
Yeah.
But he said it is the single best couch co-op experience he's had in years. They do a ton of couch co-op games together. So that's pretty high praises in my opinion. So that's pretty cool that he actually believes that the game was designed around couch co-op, and the rest of us are just allowed to enjoy it. Like, that's how firmly he feels. He goes, I think they came up with a couch co-op Diablo game, and then are like, okay, how do we make this an enjoyable experience for PC players alone?
Yeah.
He's like, I just don't see how it wasn't a fundamental thing that they were testing from the early days, and it could turn out this well. The bosses feel good. The zones feel good. He's like, we love it. So excellent. His wife went out of town to visit family, and he's like been waiting on her to progress, because he's enjoying it couch co-op so much he doesn't want to play without her. Which that's once again, like, that's pretty high praises. If the couch co-op is that nice that you don't want to play it without couch co-op, that's pretty cool. I've been having a great time without couch co-op. So it's hard to believe that this is the less premium option.
Yeah, I've been having a great time on Steam Deck and on PC and ultra wide, and also like in the handheld mode. And then obviously that's really good news, like from the couch co-op perspective, because I hadn't actually heard anybody, praise the couch co-op yet. So I was like, oh yeah, I know that existed as a feature. And so I guess as soon as kind of Julia and my life kind of get back into a kind of a more normal sleep rotation pattern, that might be something we look to pick up and play together, because she's been asking. She's like, oh man, we should sit down and like pick a game, and just like we do kind of with the show, and because we did that with like Tomb Raider, where we just kind of pass back and forth and and beat the game and, kind of move on to something else. So that might be something that could be a lot of fun. That especially if I'm making progress on like a new class and things like that, that's something I tend to enjoy, is like not feeling like, oh man, I'm progress. Like imagine like, hey, I've got my new Destiny character that's just on this one system that it doesn't affect anything else that I'm doing or any of the other friends that I play with. Like then you have to make this like weird choice. Like, do I spend time doing this or do I spend time doing that? I don't necessarily prefer that. Any other thoughts on Diablo 4 before we jump into the next subject?
No, I think it's a great game. I'm not done with it yet, but like I don't see how it's not worth I think it's $70 to buy the base copy. I don't see how it's not worth $70.
Right.
So that's that. To finish on like one final thought, I would say like, are you going to get your hour of joy per dollar? I just don't see how you're not. I'll get it in the first season. So there are people that are saying, well, they could really mess up the seasonal model, or it could be underwhelming or overwhelming. And it's like, yes, but I won't be invested in that. That's a bonus thing. Like if I'm thinking of this kind of like a God of War game. Like if I can enjoy season 1 enough that it's like paid for in my mind, then like they can totally put it out to pasture after that. And it's like, well, that's a bummer. That was a missed opportunity. But I don't feel screwed over.
Right. That's a really good point. And so that's gonna be kind of our Diablo 4. Like I totally agree with you on a dollar per hour joy. Like it is easily worth the price of admission, even if you get the higher end versions. At least right now, the amount of time I put into it, the amount of time you put into it, the amount of time that's coming in the near future with that game, makes it a really great kickoff to June, regardless of what else is coming up this month, this insane month. But speaking of that, we got a lot of news and announcements for the future of gaming. Yesterday, Summer Games Fest kicked off, and it had quite a lot of little surprises, some big reveals. Spider-Man 2 got a release date out at Summer Games Fest. I'm actually quite impressed. This felt like, obviously the replacement for E3, but a dimensional multi-games show to kind of like, kind of pivot from the Game Awards show in the winter to the kind of the summer, to kind of have like two big kind of game shows. And I thought Jeff did a fantastic job. We haven't seen a live show in a while. I was wondering if we're going to see some flubs. There are things I avoided, like the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth trailer. I haven't played through Final Fantasy VII, remake yet, and so I actually held off on watching that trailer. And now, obviously, I have more, incentive and demand for me to go and play through that. But now we're here at the at the fun month of June, where I literally have Final Fantasy 16, ready to go here on the 22nd. So I think I'm going to play through 16, and then I'll go and kind of jump back in, sometime this summer and experience Final Fantasy 7, R for what it is. So I want to kind of get Chris's kind of thoughts on it. Before we get Chris's thoughts, so be sure to like, sub, and comment below what you guys enjoyed most about Summer Game Fest, or sound off in chat, and we'll talk about your opinion as well as we film these shows live. I think we might go to a Monday, Friday kind of cadence, because this kind of feels like a nice little bookend for our week. But Chris, Summer Games Fest, what are your thoughts? Positive, negative? What do you know? What do you have questions about?
As a Final Fantasy fan, I don't see how Final Fantasy fans weren't huge winners. To basically know that we are going into FanFest season for Final Fantasy 14, that Final Fantasy 16 is right around the corner. I think there's going to be a media event or something tied to that out in LA over the next couple of weeks, rolling right into the launch. I believe I've heard some rumors of that. I don't know if that's what that's for. And then there's another 7 coming out early next year for anybody that hasn't beat the other 7. And so like there's going to be patch 6.5 and 14. Like I just don't see how, if you're like, well, maybe I should pick up the Pixel remasters. I don't see how you need those any sooner than next summer. Like it's nonstop Final Fantasy content from next month until like basically next summer. There's always going to be something you could be churning away at, unless you just get to play a lot of games in a given week. For people that only play 2 to 8 hours a week, which is the typical gamer, you've got more than enough meat on the bone to just consume only Final Fantasy content. But that wasn't the only thing at the show.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't. I see chat. Is he saying mother effing Nick Cage showing up for Summer Games Fest?
Walked out.
Oh, dude, Julie and I loved Redfield. Renfield. Because like he's Dracula in that movie, and he's like, I'm a Nick Cage fan. I'm not gonna lie, like the guy makes solid movies, and I I hope that he's got his financial
He
situation.
makes a lot of movies. Some of them are solid.
Yeah. In terms of ratio, like he's like, yeah, we're just kind of, spreading the odds out that the game's going to be good. Now, and he's going to be showing up in Dead by Daylight, which like that's an interesting kind of, obviously property that's continued to draw in upon kind of horror. And honestly, it feels like a very fitting, kind of place for a Nick Cage, especially if you ever saw like the massive weight of like talent, or I'm butchering the name of that movie. It's an absolute must watch Nick Cage film, and that's essentially where like his kind of role in showing up brought it. So that surprise I thought was great. And the fact that like, Summer Games Fest in and of itself had those surprises, and at least with the Nick Cage announcement, it didn't feel like one of those like, hey, we brought on this celebrity who then like, it just feels like, I know I'm getting paid to be here, guys. It's like, but it felt a little bit more like natural. So I was actually quite thrilled to see Nick Cage kind of come
People
up
knew
on
he
stage.
was coming to Dead by Daylight. So like, I think the other thing is that the crowd was, like I think a lot of the reveals yesterday were reveals for the fact that the industry is inundated with news. So like, I was surprised at the Path of Exiles 2 announcement, but Path of Exiles 2 fans were not.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think that we're also just in a time where you have a mixed crowd, and that makes it a warmer reception, because you have people that are like, I've been looking forward to this, and you have other people that are like, what is happening?
Yeah. And that's actually something that's an interesting point, right? Because one of the things that I've kind of like, I guess kind of been annoyed by, but also talked about just to bring awareness about it, is that while I feel like 2023 has been a really good year for games, at least I feel like I'm enjoying the games that I'm playing, and I keep hearing that the games I'm playing suck. Everybody's like, Forspoken is garbage, and then it feels like every game is like an online race to be like the worst game of 2023. And I'm like, I play them, play Redfield, and it's like, yeah, it's not a perfect game, but I'm like, I'm enjoying myself. Like, I don't know, I'm just finding that 2023 has been a really fun year for me personally. But then the online discourse is that, and I think I heard somebody talk about how it's, I think, coming from people who are just over consuming news, so that they're like on every rumor, if they're on every little bit of news drop when they sit down for Summer Games Fest, which draws in a massive, bigger audience than essentially kind of the like everybody who's here at Work to Game, or even beyond in like these bigger communities that are like plugged in. Like a lot of the news in and of itself isn't that massive, right? Because I think Throne and Liberty dropped a really great trailer yesterday, Summer Games Fest. So I was excited to see that. They finally launched the site. You can now sign up for the closed test that is apparently coming pretty soon. And this is really good. Like, this is something I'm personally excited about. But when you go through like the information, a lot of it isn't brand new. To me, it might be brand new to somebody who's now like, wait, what's this game? It's coming to consoles. It's coming to
people are surprised 14's getting an expansion. They're going to find out late
July.
They're like, whoa, I heard you guys are getting an expansion
for 14. This is news to me. Well, like, welcome to the earth, you beautiful, summer sweet child. There's so much to tell you, and also like, we'll also teach you about the other side of the coin whenever you understand the pattern. When you have Chris's spreadsheet downloaded and have all the future dates pretty much locked in, there's that side of it too. There's all kinds of fans. So like, I think that was an important announcement. The Sonic, the game, they showed off with the kind of the modern look, but with the classic kind of 2D gameplay. I think that's going to be that's something that excites me. But then obviously the debate shifts to, is that a $60 game? Is that a $70? Like, is that worth the price of a modern game? And most likely it really all depends on what else they offer, because if they're just going to sell you, Sonic, 5, that's all like, hey, we've got really great graphics, but we've got classic Sonic gameplay, and that's it. Like, I don't know if that people will justify that. Like, if you try to sell, any kind of game, but if they end up having all kinds of features and things like that that really kind of keep you engaged, like, then price becomes a whole different kind of conversation. But I'm not really ever worried about price, because we know that as long as it's not a Nintendo IP, that prices will continue to fall with these games until they kind of reach that $20 to $40, ultimate sweet spot, of which that, when sitting out on the market, that's how that goes. The obviously Final Fantasy VII Rebirth trailer, big announcement, smart announcement. A lot of people, I heard a lot of discourse about how they got that at Summer Games Fest, how they got the announcement for the Spider-Man 2 release date. I think that's important, because that allows that information to get out there. Final Fantasy 16 has an event this Sunday, the 11th. In fact, like when we look at the Summer Game Fest, the PC Gaming Show, Ubisoft, Capcom Showcase, Xbox, Starfield, obviously the Future Games. So like June 10th, 11th, and 12th, like are really kind of the next big hitters for news. And this allows Square Enix to kind of have their Final Fantasy 16 event. And already the Final Fantasy, 7 Rebirth like trailers dropped. And so they're not necessarily stepping on their toes. They're letting people be excited about this. Then they'll let people be excited about the thing on the 11th. And then it's only just like less than 2 weeks away until the game's out. So people get to download the demo, play it for themselves, and decide if they want to jump in with the latest round of that. So I felt like overall, like it was a really good show. Lots of really good pieces of like news. The one thing I would say, like if where I think they missed, and this is just in the games that I'm currently like excited about, like I didn't see anything about Blue Protocol, and I didn't see anything about a new world, like the New World expansion. I thought this would be a really good time to kind of have that New World expansion trailer, but then they might be sitting on it because it either isn't ready or they're going to launch it, sometime this summer to build up hype for whenever they have a more firmed release date. I just thought that you had a lot of eyes on Summer Games Fest. That would be a really interesting time to have, like that hype kind of trailer with the announcement of the expansion. That would have been a really good opportunity. And who knows, they, like I just said, there's a bunch of other events coming up, and maybe that could be slotted in there, or maybe it's just going to be something we have to wait till July before they start kind of sharing publicly. Any misses, anything that you would have liked to seen different?
No, I mean, I wasn't paying like super close. I don't own every console, and I don't have time for this many games. So I really just want to focus on like what's the good news that came out. If somebody dropped the ball, like doesn't bother. It's not. I don't know. It just doesn't seem worth fretting over. Having live events and stuff again is great. I'm looking forward to going back to a convention here in July. I don't know if I'll be able to go to BlizzCon or not, but it would be nice to. It's just nice to see things kind of return to celebrate the big moments. And I think we have a lot of great games right now. So it's nice to see that stuff get celebrated. It's just fun to be a healthy industry.
Yeah.
We've had several years of just like, every time you find out that somebody awful, you're like, yeah, but so is this other person. You're like, that doesn't make me feel better. Finding out that this other group of people is also awful doesn't make the first group not awful. So like, it's just nice. Like Diablo being good, World of Warcraft being in a good state. It's nice to have Blizzard making good games. It's nice to have conferences that have things that are conventions and shows that have people excited about things. It's nice to have Final Fantasy making lots of titles that feel really core. I don't know. It's just a good time to be a gamer.
So when it comes to Final Fantasy VII, I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about that, because that's something that you and I both share deeply. Obviously, we haven't played Remake. Now, you played the demo. I played a little bit of the demo with you back on the PS4. Obviously, I now have a PS5. I actually downloaded and bought the game last summer and have just not gotten around to actually playing it. Do you have obviously, like when it comes to time into games, like now that like Rebirth has been kind of announced and it's got a trailer and it's got kind of a release window for next year, is this something that you're thinking about putting on your, I guess, schedule to sit down and play through it? Or are there more important Final Fantasy experiences that you want to, play through first?
Honestly, like it being a triad, I'd rather just wait for all three to release and just do it then.
Yeah.
I'm not alone in that. So like, I hope enough people buy it that they can justify making all three, because like if everybody did what I did and nobody got the first one or second one,
you screwed us over, Chris.
Project.
They needed one more sale. This is Square Enix. Sales did not meet expectations. Damn you, Chris.
So I'm hopeful they've like pre-funded all three and then I can just kind of patiently wait.
Yeah.
And I'd love to play them all in a row.
Yeah. See, that's where I kind of am personally like struggling, because I haven't seen the trailer. The trailer was up. I was like, oh yeah, this is Final Fantasy VII. I'm gonna dip out. And despite not necessarily being too spoiler warning, like if I came across the trailer, like I would be fine. My life wouldn't be over if someone told me like all of what Final Fantasy VII, remake was, because the only thing I know is that there's hints that there's something that's different. There's something off about the story, like on purpose, not like, oh, they forgot the story that they were telling. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. I'm excited to see what happens. So but now that with like remake, it's like I know, like, because I originally was like, gosh, I really want to play it. Obviously, I want to buy it, so I buy it for support. But then still, the lack of any kind of Xbox transparency with this game, like, it just makes me go like, well, it's now been 2 years. Will they announce it? Will they announce Final Fantasy VII remake for Xbox? Here in the coming weeks, because I think that would be an instant buy, because A, I buy for support, and then B, obviously, like, want to sit down and play it so that I could then be ready to experience remake. The question ends up always just going to be, when do I find that time to sit down and consume it? And where with 16, like, it's my lifestyle schedules. Julie asked, what do you want for Father's Day? I go, I just want time to play and finish Final Fantasy 16. That's all I want. You don't need to buy me anything. We're good. I just want that kind of time, and to ask them to come back and be like, hey, can I have that? So I might have to play it offline just to experience it rather than stream it, because that ends up being kind of obviously the biggest schedule. But yeah, I'm with you on the trilogy mindset, because I then would question, they could do more than a trilogy. Like, this game has so much, I think, to offer. What if it ended up becoming its own?
They just don't know how numbers work, and like, it's
Yeah.
like, I'm getting into Final Fantasy, so you play them in order. It's like, no, like, 7's its own universe that has 25 games, and 15 you can't read the books and then watch the movie. And have you not been getting the weekly newsletter? And it's like every number is just a different buyer profile. Like, they don't have any relationship to each other.
Like, what are you talking about?
It's like, what? And 14 is the 30-year running MMO. It's like, what is happening? So yeah, that would be, that's what it is. That each number is just a different monetization strategy.
Yeah.
So 18's when they try NFTs.
18 is an NFT. It's just there's only printed so many digital copies.
They only made so many 18s.
So good luck finding a copy. Like, yeah, that'd be absolutely horrible. Kuso says, as a dad myself, I totally agree with, I just want some time to game. So yeah, I think that is essentially kind of the story in and of itself. I'll let you guys know, because even more, like, I was talking with people online, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, yes, you need to go play through 7 remake. And I think that's going to be, I think I'm going to put that, like, rather than wait for like a trilogy, like, which will be your strategy, I think I'm going to put time into it after I beat 16. So that way, from a combat system, as the, like, has, 7 has that kind of like action turn-based kind of mindset, to be able to like say like, hey, what do I feel is what would I like to see in 17? What do I want to see in these combat systems as they evolve and change and kind of play itself out? Because I too also would love to see party members come back to where, like, as a Final Fantasy game, you have those. And so, just like I think in our last podcast, like, if they decided to go and make another Final Fantasy pixel remaster of a brand new Final Fantasy, pixelated game with a turn-based, system, I'd be all for that. I think that would be something that would be really cool to see them kind of continue on in different kind of styles, right? Like, you could have like almost the 7 style, you could have the Octopath style, you could have the pixel remaster style, you could have the 16 style, you could have the 14 style. Like, all of a sudden, it's like you just have all these different kind of like, almost in a way, like, here's kind of the parent of, how then you kind of track this down, rather than any one specific way that defines what it is to be a Final Fantasy game. Any other thoughts regarding Final Fantasy VII Remake, Rebirth, and whatever they call the next one? Maybe they even announced it, I can't even remember. Any other ones?
No.
All right. So at this point, I'm going to jump into the comment section, guys. Let me bring up the screen itself. If you're still listening, watching live, or watching this as an archive, be sure to hit that like, sub, and share button. And we will dive in. Let's toss up to this view in and of itself. We're going to jump through as we like to do, and get caught up on you guys' comments. So as you leave comments on the videos, we like to bring those in and discuss those for anybody who here is new. For anybody here who's live, just sound up and chat. I'd like to toss up your chat and stuff like that as kind of goes. So this is kind of a more great way to wrap up the discussion of anything that we've talked about. But right now, we're going to jump into the first comment from Barsona, who says, there is no need to defend content scheduling. If people can't understand what goes behind the work being done, then they're blissfully ignorant of a 9-to-5 job. As well as Yoshi P himself is playing Zelda on stream. I think that this shows everyone with some sick obsession with the game that they need to take a break. And also it shows confidence that even if people go play other games, that they will come back. That takes some balls, in my opinion. Laugh out loud. Chris, what floor is yours, sir?
Yeah, I think there's a healthy relationship with 14 that we can have times to step away. And so, but it does take some confidence. The idea that as a restaurant owner, you would encourage people to try other restaurants. It's not only based in reality, but like it is a point of confidence that you're like, they'll be back. Like, I'm not worried about them liking the other place so much that I'm not going to see them again, because I believe that we make a product worth having a second time. So I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's been his mantra the whole time. He loves other games. He like noted here, he's played Zelda on stream, but he's talked about all sorts of other games that he's enjoyed over the years, including Blizzard games, which is like one of those things that, a lot of 14 fans are like, well, not all, but like there is definitely a portion of 14 fans that really don't like Blizzard games. And so for him to show respect to that in a room that he could have tossed shade at Blizzard every time it came up and it would have been fine. But he didn't. So like, I think he just likes games. And as a fan of games, like, you don't want to be the only game that's out there.
Yeah. I think a lot kind of stems from the evolution of the MMO, and in a way, like the pay structure that these games like really used to rely on heavily, like obviously the subscription, but that was subscription only. Now these games have the cash shops, and like them or not, that from a monetization perspective, with the idea of an expansion coming out every 2 years, pretty much like clockwork, obviously give or take a little bit for life and crazy world events, that you end up having these reintroductions or reinvitations, kind of check-in milestones that you don't have to, but ultimately, if they can invite you back in, it's healthy to say it's okay to go play other things. Where I see friction in terms of it is that, like I myself have stated this, is that, but what if I don't actually want to take a break? What if there isn't another game that I'm actively looking to play? What can the game then offer? And I think that's a valid critique that should be discussed. And I'm sure the dev team behind it is discussing, and hopefully they will continue to kind of look at like, what can you do within the game for players who don't want to necessarily take a break, but at the same time, make it so that people who do want to take a break don't feel punished for doing so. And I think that adds to, like, for example, like just being able to step away from when you're not feeling your best can help you kind of have that perspective and allow you to find the joy in what you're doing, as opposed to the grind, which, like if you're only grinding in one game, living in one game, it can be very isolating, especially when all of a sudden you hit that wall. And the wall people have hit, people that would have never expected to hit that wall, because, like, honestly, like I thought after time and time and time, they're like, oh, this game's great. This game's great. Now, all of a sudden I'm seeing like, whoa, what's happening with Endwalker? I'm I was like legitimately surprised by some of the voices that I've seen stepping up and saying it, to the point where, yeah, I think that would be healthy for them to actually start to take into practice like this mindset that it's okay to step away. And what's up? What do you want to say something?
I will say that the way you're phrasing that makes it sound like the game is shrinking. Like it is, they have done nothing but grow. Like the number of active players, this has been their highest retention expansion yet, is what I believe the numbers have been stated.
No, that's absolutely not true. They've lost a huge chunk of the active player base, but that doesn't matter. Like people put like value into the numbers. That doesn't matter. Like, are they financially solvent and profitable and able to take the money from 14 and make other games down 100%? But the heat map in and of itself like speaks volumes. PvP did more, I think, than Endwalker as an expansion in terms of retention. Like that, those numbers actually were like, wow, when you see back in time, those numbers have held on to more people playing the game, because that's, I think, one of the effects of PvP. Like it has that variety that continues to invite people in and enjoy the game itself. But I'm not throwing shade at the game. I'm just saying that people who used to defend the game, like without, like, where you would say, I'll never, like, this game's perfect, I'll never take a break, and it'll never upset me. And I'm like, all right. And to their credit, for years and years and years, that was what they stated. and then all of a sudden seeing them like absolutely just like frustrated with the game tells me that everybody has a limit. It's just a matter of what it is. And if you don't think you do, I think that shock of when the game all of a sudden isn't necessarily for you comes on a lot stronger, and you have a much more like visceral, like, oh, I'm blaming the game because it's not doing the thing that it never has done, before, but I'm now just finally hitting that wall. I think that is why Yoshi P's strategy is so critical. So that's just, I don't know if that clarifies.
It was from a live letter that it is the largest, most consistent daily player count of any expansion so far.
In terms of what?
In terms of consistent daily players over the course of of an expansion. What a 0.3 looks like, what a 0.2 looks like when compared to previous 0.3s, 0.2s. This is the largest daily active users.
And how is that different from what I said, where PvP has held on to way more players than prior?
Because you're talking about burnout, and what I said is like, just keep in mind that I think the total player base has been more engaged.
I mean, but the total player base has gone up. So like in terms of that, like that seems like, hey, we've sold more consoles. Oh, it turns out there's actually more gamers like that are available. Like there's still burnout, and people are going to hit that wall at different times. So I like, honestly, how I hear it, I think we're saying the same thing, but you probably don't think we're saying the same thing.
I just think that the game's in a really healthy state. And so like, yes, there are people having burnout, people who progged DSR and then progged P8 week one when it was really hard, and then like stayed with that, and maybe their static fell apart again and it's a different static, and then they went into top. And so like there are specific aspects of the community that are very frustrated, people who have historically put a lot of time into relics, and that's been their end game. This relic, this expansion, well, I think it will age really well, like the Heavensward expansion, because it's going to become poetics only for the steps we know of so far. In the moment, just being told for the same 1500 doesn't feel good. And so like I understand that frustration in that moment, but I think Endwalker will age really well, as opposed to a lot of the things I said about Shadowbringers when I was talking about the changes for Shadowbringers, talking about the changes they made to crafting and gathering and things like that, that my issues with them were how they would age, not with how they'd be played. And so like I think Endwalker's coming at it totally the opposite direction. There is a lot of longevity inside of Endwalker, where I think a lot of these systems are going to age really well. And so what that's meant is that there are a lot of players who are keeping their subs active, but they're not playing every individual day anymore. And they're starting to say, hey, you know what? And on Fridays, I play Tears of the Kingdom, or this weekend, I'm going to play Diablo 4, or I can't wait to play Final Fantasy 16, but they are still checking in for weekly resets, or they're in an achievement Discord, or they're doing their hunts each week because they enjoy that. And so like, it's made it a much more like sustainable long-term state. Think about when you first start dating somebody and it's you hang up, no, you hang up. And every moment you're attached at the hip, like they sewed your pockets together. And there comes a point where it's like, okay, and now we're out hanging out with our friends again, but our relationship is healthier than ever. So like, I think 14's in a really good spot to be a healthy long-term game. And that is what Yoshi P's numbers are talking about, with like daily, like consistent active numbers are higher than ever. The burnout is very loud and very vocal, and it's in people who have not taken those breaks. It's in people who have not felt comfortable to stream Diablo 4 or something like that. And so as maybe a streamer or a YouTuber, they feel like they can only play the one game. And so they've put themselves in a position that really has nothing to do with 14. If you did anything, you're like, oh, well, I professionally eat pizza for a living. It's like, well, at some point you're going to get tired of pizza. Like, you chose a really weird lifestyle. But for the average player, the vast majority of players, I think 14 is in a really healthy spot.
And did you hear me say something other than that?
Yes.
What did you hear?
When you first started saying this, you were talking about the people of burnout, and it was stated in a way where it sounded like it was the trend. And so I agreed that those people existed, but I said that that is an outlier. That is not the generalized trend. And it sounded to me like you doubled down on, no, but it is. And anybody who doesn't feel they're part of that trend just doesn't know they're part of that trend yet. And I'm saying Yoshi P is saying that the vast majority that is trending the other way. Those people are becoming more and more the outliers, the ones that are experiencing burnout, because there are more and more ways to have a healthy relationship with 14, because the off ramps are built into the highway.
Yeah, I don't believe I said that it was trending downward. What I said was people that I never expected to like publicly voice that they were frustrated with the game have come out and said that. And so for me, I found like, oh, that's interesting. Which the data point that gives me is that everybody has that point in that wall that they hit, but that doesn't mean that they won't return. And that doesn't mean that the game is trending downward. But what I do mean, and I saw somebody talking about like what numbers is like when Endwalker finished, we saw the biggest dip in terms of active users. The point that I'm making all this is that doesn't even matter. People who make a big deal out of it, the reason why people make a big deal out of it for non-Final Fantasy games is because it generates headlines. But in terms of Final Fantasy 14, people do especially have a long-term established trust with the dev team, especially Yoshi P. And I think that's why this model in and of itself makes sense. I'm going to get hit in the comments on this highlight video from people who are like, no, this like absolutely sucks because they've hit that burnout because they haven't listened repeatedly to what Yoshi P said. So I didn't say anything about this trending downward, but in terms of like numbers and everything like that, we did see the biggest drop in active players after Endwalker, which that makes complete sense because of the nature of what Endwalker kind of finishing off the story. And then the expansion content, I think, is what people caught off guard. But I'm actually defending the game. So if you're hearing any kind of form of attack, I don't know how to state
I
it
just think
differently.
retention's really high. I think retention's really high.
Oh, it's been huge. If you go look at 6.1, like, and you go and compare that historically, 6.1, especially bringing in Crystalline Conflict and the nature of PvP, has been massive. We're talking about absolute dominance in terms of, retaining players who keep playing the game. Where before you could see a dip in 10, 15%. After kind of the patch. And then all of a sudden you're seeing it like maybe 1 or 2%. So that's what I said. Like, I think we're saying the same thing. So I'm not necessarily gathering in how people feel offended by what I'm talking about. But if you feel offended, guys, I do apologize.
I think it's a great time for just massively multiplayer role-playing games.
Yeah.
I think that you have, and it's one of the reasons that I think like something like Destiny 2, I enjoyed the Destiny 2 expansion launch. It's just in a field that's really competitive right now. I think Dragonflight is a better game. I think Final Fantasy 14 right now is a better game. I think Guild Wars is trending and is knocking on the door if they're not already there. I think New World is really trying hard to like serve their community. I think old school RuneScape is just chugging right along. And so like we're in a field right now where if you deliver a good product on time that mostly works, that's not necessarily enough. It's a great time to be somebody in this space, a player in this space, because there are a lot of communities that are being very, very, very well served. Diablo 4 is a great product on launch, and that doesn't mean they haven't had server issues and lag issues, because it is the fastest selling Blizzard game of all time, and it just can't handle it. I went to log in last night and the servers were off. Like, that sucks. That's week 1 of successful games. It is, and I'd love to live in a world where it's not, but it is. But like, we're just in a great state, and healthy retention feels up. Like, I see people complaining that Twitch numbers are down, and in individual sectors and in individual directories, they may be, but the platform as a whole has actually been fairly healthy. We're just getting to a point where like, it's not the exciting news, because it's, hey, people have a healthy relationship with things, and they sometimes do it and they sometimes don't. And that's just not, it's not as thrilling to talk about as if everybody was doing it all the time or everybody was never touching it. Those would be more exciting things to discuss.
Absolutely. Anyway, so chat, like, I was just getting caught up on that. So in terms of that, I apologize for the statement on the retention in that regards, because like I think I either misspoke or I was thinking of something different. But I've been coming at this in terms of how I felt like Final Fantasy 14 is in an absolutely good state, and Yoshi P's mindset of taking breaks is the secret sauce. I think it's essentially trying to hold on to people arbitrarily, and then into, maybe this is where I like completely went in the wrong direction or spoke in the wrong direction, is that where I see PvP obviously having that retention, a part of the people who I feel are, and this is just me talking with a lot of different gamers, have stated like they're looking for more reasons not to to play other games, and not necessarily finding those. And that's essentially where I think it's always been a good time to take a break. And we've talked about that in terms of how people play. Cause I saw like, and I highlighted a comment about how like they felt like the dip ended up being a lot of the WoW players having then played and then deciding to either go back to World of Warcraft or go check out any other kind of game. Like that could be one point of it. But the other side of the coin is that you also have players who, like me, finish the story and feel like you have that complete experience and then ultimately kind of see what ends up taking the next step. But anyway, chat called me out on it. I'll I'll admit defeat on that point, especially, and I apologize if I misspoke. And whether upset or debate, that's why we do these things live rather than to record them offline. All right, Chris, any final thoughts on this comment?
No.
All right, moving on to the next one. Ventus 777777 says, I think the whole that this whole post and patch cycle has been purposely not light but less intense on purpose, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Mostly, obviously, that this post patch cycle is a way that it is in some small level because of Final Fantasy 16 lighter workload for Creative Business Unit 3 to help the game for a perfect for launch. But I think that there is also an argument to be made that this is light and it doesn't want you to feel forced to play. The post-patch story, while I love it, is not as intense as other post-patch stories tend to be, since the Bloody Banquet is because of Endwalker, and in fact, it did end a major storyline that was very emotionally impactful. Brian crying at least once per stream from Garlemald until the credits stopped rolling is my first thought in this case, and my goodness, there were definitely some big moments in that. We're not going to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen those. Anyway, and they might want just an easy 2 years to let people recharge, play other games like 16, come back in 7.0 with a renewed energy. Yes, this means that some players are going to feel unhappy about the general lack of reasons to play or too casual on some level, but I think lull is needed so people can rest and be ready for the future. Do you feel like Endwalker has had any kind of content lull since it released?
6.35 was a little light compared to previous half patches. And 6.4, in my opinion, actually hit a little heavy. And 6.45 does not look like it had to give anything up to make that happen. So I do have to wonder if maybe we could have taken one or two features from 6.4 and pulled them into 6.35 to give a more balanced experience. But no, I feel the total content's been there. There are some things like Criterion was a big piece of content, but because the rewards were lackluster, it didn't have the life cycle that it could have. And the fact that the relic didn't tie into it, where you could go run your Criterion each week to get some relic progression or something like that as an alternative path. Like when we did last expansion, we had multiple paths. That kind of like let it kind of die on the vine. But no, I think total content, if you just wrote down the number of pieces of content and the average number of hours it would take somebody to clear that, Endwalker's been punching fine. Narratively, however, I think it is a much needed rest. And Yoshi P talked about how, like, to let Endwalker sink in, you have to let those adventurers rest. Like if they just the world was in danger
next
again.
Big bad, yeah.
That's one of the big complaints of WoW, is that every time you've like finally saved the entire universe, they're like, except that you haven't saved the universe of universes. And so like people get kind of fatigued with that. And so, one of the things that 14 does well is it brings out, there are times that there is an existential threat to all people, and that's a big deal. There are times that it is a more narrow threat to a small group of people and can hit just as hard because you're saving those people. So it doesn't have to be the entire planet is at risk to the same degree every single time. As far as the 16 tax, that actually, they've been working on 16 since, I believe, Stormblood. And so when you have people like Koji giving way to Kate, like that, that's not an effect on Endwalker. I'm not saying that like there has not been attacks throughout time and all of that. And I'm not saying they're not hoping that 16 does very well, but 14, if there ever was attacks, it would likely have affected Stormblood and Shadowbringers. By now, I would think a lot of that would have leveled out because they've had, 4 to 6 years to let those people kind of age into those roles as those have been handed off. We are just now becoming aware of it publicly because Yoshi P keeps things so much closer to the chest than other devs who maybe talk about an MMO that doesn't have a release date or even nailed down systems. And so like Yoshi P, when he works on a project, be it 14 or otherwise, he keeps that stuff really close to the chest. If we go back to Stormblood at the time, there were times in interviews, especially at things like FanFest, where people would say, if you could ever work on a game outside of Square Enix, or if you could work on a game outside of Final Fantasy XIV, what would you do? And he would say, well, this isn't really the place to talk about something like that. But to answer it briefly, if I could, and then he would give a description of the kind of game he would love to make. Many of those descriptions actually line up a great deal with what 16 became. So he was just talking from like, here's the thing I'm already working on. So he was kind of leaking what he was working on. So I don't think the tax part is as heavy of a hitter. I think that the rest is something that's, you know, I think the second half of this comment really hits on like letting us breathe as players, I think is the bigger driver.
I think that's important. I think the other thing a lot of people tend to forget about in terms of like the development approach to it is that Yoshi P, like his skill in terms of management and leadership, is that a lot of this stuff is planned out, worked, budgeted, and everybody kind of just remembers how they are now. But one of the things that happened when we were all in lockdown is Square Enix still released content, and to where other companies and everybody else was like, how has this even happened? Hell, Soken was fighting cancer, still putting out stuff while he was fighting cancer in the hospital. Like beyond like that one moment, they still had a plan. It wasn't like the only thing they had to figure out was how do we do this remotely? However, I think what we end up seeing, especially with the patch content, where people might necessarily feel that is that before the big rush of, you know, Stormblood leading into Endwalker, and we saw like that massive influx of players where like the numbers were just going up millions by millions. Like every time they got together, it's like, well, we were at 22 million. Did we say 22? We meant 25. Did we say 25? We're now at 27. Like it's like just like to the where the servers were just literally could not handle the influx when all of a sudden everybody who was on a break decided to come back at the same time. But during all that, during the budget and the planning, before all that rush, like you had to, you know, sit here and do the budget of what the people we are working on, what also is going on with Creative Business Unit 3. That's why I think 16 being finished here in a couple of weeks will be such an interesting time. And it's going to be such a really big time going into FanFest because of the nature of what they can then start to announce. And so I don't necessarily think that like, you know, the next patch is going to all of a sudden, you know, like with the 0.5 that you're going to see like, oh, and here's all this extra content that you felt like, you know, that somebody might feel is quote unquote missing. But I do think that that's going to help set up the narrative for what is to come in the expansion. But I would still want to caution as we start talking about 7.0, Chris and I are both like 2024, maybe March, you know, like maybe May, like in that, start thinking in that time frame, because I still see people online talk about how 7.0 is going to be out this Christmas. And I'm just like, if they did that,
Japanese FanFest.
Right, exactly. Like that's
just the base level. Like what would that be about? What would Japanese FanFest be hyping?
I don't know. Not even hyping, but it's like, oh, nobody showed up because they're all out playing the game, unless they're like,
yeah, I think that one. Now that we have a date for Japanese FanFest, we didn't always, but now that we do, it said early 2024. But there were some people that kind of thought like, well, if that's January 1st, but like now that we have a date, like I definitely don't think it's anywhere before that date. As a matter of fact, like I don't think it'd be the week after that date, because I think that the media tour would be after that. The media tour has historically been about a month out. So if they do another media tour, I would think you would come out of FanFest, do the media tour at a minimum a month later, and then at a minimum do the expansion a month later, which puts you at a March release time at the earliest. It could easily push later. And then of course there's always the wild 5%, 1% chance speculation that we get, you know, a bigger 0.55 cycle, or the even wilder speculation of what if we had the mythical, elusive, never going to happen 0.6. I'd love to see a 0.6. Imagine if the raid story got one more.
That would be, I think, honestly, that would be a kind of a refreshing kind of take, because the 0.5 with 0.55 tends to be the longest running patch. And, you know, it ends up being the moment where so many players come back, so many players get caught up in the story because you have the expansion hype, leads into the expansion, and then, you know, they kind of then go take the break, and then everybody else who's like continuing to play sticks around because they've got point one and then point two, and you get kind of into that, like, oh, here's what's coming. Now, Wolf of the Fallen says, I don't even understand why people complain about having nothing to do when there is plenty for me to do in 14. The problem isn't why is there nothing to do as much as why is there nothing to do for me. And I think that rings true. That's something that you and I've kind of talked about, numerous times, is that a lot of people, the argument isn't, or the counterpoint to go push back on somebody who's like, I don't have anything to do, is that, have you done everything? Because not necessarily everything will resonate, but I think ideally the conversation should shift to, have you tried these other things? Like, not necessarily like, do you need to master it, but like, have you tried that system? Because sometimes you might not know what resonates with you as a player until you actually go hands-on with it. And that's something that I find for me, whenever I try something that I'm like, it usually isn't my thing, to be surprising. Namely, one thing that continues to be confirmed to me is MOBAs. I've tried MOBAs, and I just haven't found any single MOBA that I actually enjoy. Therefore, I can confidently at this point in time say I don't enjoy MOBAs, but not necessarily is there something that will, I know that I've been surprised multiple times, especially like within Gathering. Like, I really enjoyed, Gathering in some games where, like, before trying it, I never resonated with it. Do you have any thoughts on this?
It's why things like LOL achievements and stuff breathe a whole new life into a game for me. It's why I get so frustrated when achievement panes and daily challenge logs and quest logs and all that don't integrate with each other. Something that can better integrate achievements, something closer to, the Guild Wars 2 approach of like everything being achievement starts to give some level of credence. It can be hard to use for a newer player, so it's not that there aren't caveats to that, but like 14 has a lot to do that is not tied to achievements. For being a narrative-based game, there are a lot of beautifully written side quests throughout Endwalker that people haven't done. And so if you really do like the game for story and you've run out of things to do because the story is a fraction of the total hours that the average longtime player has put into the game, one of the things you could do to get more story is, have you done the side quest? This expansion, they've been adding quests after each kind of MSQ step. That's wonderful. There's some really great quests. There's a quest that takes you through the backstory of the 4 Archfiends, and it's amazing. It's amazing. It's a beautifully written quest. It's got these great little cinematics. And so I think that they're not voice acted, so you have to just kind of love it to love it. But there's a lot of really great stuff there. And having achievements like WoW's Lore Master, or having map completion like Guild Wars 2, or some system to say like, hey, we're just going to give you 20 bicolor gemstones if you complete all the side quests in an area. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Just some little carrot to make people go, I did it because it gave something and I hadn't done it before, and I actually really had a great time. Because it does become a little more sandbox as soon as you've gotten past the MSQ and the battle content you like to do, whether that be PvP or Savage or whatever. As soon as you get past that, you have to start saying, I'm going to go catch all the big fish, or I'm going to go get to a bunch of old relics, or so it becomes a little more sandboxy. And it's kind of a big cliff where you just kind of like, you're on this paved road and then you're just in the sand. And I'd like to see that be a little more like you transition from a paved road to pavers to a dirt path to sand. So it's not just immediately like grinding old achievements feels just as foreign to a newer player as going and engaging in the RP community. I would like to see that gap get bridged a little bit by Square officially. Instead of being third-party tools and members of the community guiding it, which is great. There are great Discords, LOL achievements, and others are great. But it'd be nice to see Square take a more active role in that.
Yeah. All right. And as I found a comment for today's show, we'll be live back with you guys on Monday. Lots of news is going to be happening this weekend for sure. So we'll be sure to have that kind of covered in different topics around it. But Gizmo says, is the Work the Game channel itself now just these live streams, and the live streams broken up into individual videos? Is that all the uploads now? Just curious. I hope that doesn't come across as rude. Not rude at all, but yes, that is essentially what this channel is. We announced that, I think, like a year or two ago. And we've done a couple of different things, but mainly this is pretty much what our vision was for the channel back when it got started. And now that Chris has Gaming Kinda, and I've got the Ginger Prime network of channels, it just makes that makes perfect sense to how we're doing content. Chris, do you want to add anything?
No, it's just been a slow transition. I mean, this August 8th, Work to Game turns 8. Woo-hoo. So this is the current chapter. We've had chapters before this. There will probably be chapters after this. But work to game has been kind of a moving formula. But this, like Brian said, like this chapter right now has been really relaxing because this is the closest to the original vision. Not that the departures haven't been fun along the way, but like when we first sat down before publishing our first video, this is the closest to what that vision was. That vision had a lot of naiveness to it and a lot of blindness. And so there's a lot that we discovered along the way that I'm really thankful for. But this is the closest to what we originally intended.
And as a follow-up, because like Chris and I, like, this is what got us started, just sitting down talking about games. We agree on a lot of things, and there's just a handful of things that we always kind of get some push back and forth on each other. But what Kuso's asking, is there a Ginger Prime on Twitch? No, like Chris and I, like as a part of that, like when I stream on Twitch, like that's where I'm on the Work to Game channel, and then Chris is on the Work to Game channel, and then Chris on YouTube's got, Gaming Kinda, and then I got, on YouTube Ginger Prime, and then I have like different breakout channels because I found that, especially when it comes to MMOs, like it's much easier in the way that I like to talk about them to kind of have certain ones broken out and on their own, which I have a Blue Protocol and a New World channel. And those are doing in like incredible numbers in terms of what I like to look at is comments and then click-through rate, because that's something that says that, hey, people are interested in the content. So I've been really excited about that. And I'm really excited about like all the things that are to come out this summer, namely 16. Like that's honestly like where I'm just like, okay, let's go. I see UFO, invade like things all on YouTube and on the news. And I'm just like, just hold off if there's an invasion until after I can play through 16, because that's so that's literally what I was thinking the other day. So this is what we do, and we thank you guys so much for hanging out with us, and obviously being here live, and or like as you check out as we break these things up into the videos, etc. What we end up doing, though, just for those who haven't kind of like caught on, is this is a podcast is a part of a podcast playlist, and then we also chapter marker it, and then those chapters where relevant like become the videos. So not every podcast gets every minute of it broken up into video form, but at least if nothing else, like the different subjects. And so while we kind of chat, like as I kind of jump between comments and whatnot, I always try to keep adding the timestamps, so that way then it makes it easier to split them up into videos. And then it also makes it easier for somebody who's coming and listening later, whenever they want to consume the podcast, to kind of see if they're like, oh, I don't really care about them talking about Diablo. They can literally just skip right over that chapter and into the whatever other topics we have covered. And then at Pride says, Brian has one YouTube channel for each kid. I really hope that there's not too many more MMOs coming out. That poor house. I only have so much time to cover certain MMOs, so I'm only going to cover the MMOs that I'm generally like excited about playing and or currently playing. So that will always be interesting. That's kind of how it goes. So that's pretty much it. Chris, do you have any final thoughts before I get back to working on all this fun code?
No, in the background, I've been running around just grabbing Shrines of Lilith, and I just dinged level 50 in Diablo. Yay. So I'm going to be doing Act 3 today. Finishing up Act 3. I'm way out leveled. You don't have to be level 50 to be done with Act 3, because what's happened is I've been doing this story on stream, but then I've been loving the game. So when I do off stream, I've been doing all this world completion. And so I'm like wildly out leveled, to the point where the quests sync with you. There's a cap, because I've noticed that some quests end up they're like 5 levels below me, 10 levels below me, because they scaled to a limit, and I have exceeded that limit. And so there are occasionally times where like I've been playing offline, and at the beginning of stream I get a really easy quest because I'm way too powerful. So I'm gonna get back to Diablo. It's been a great game. It's really nice to just play a great game. Tears of the Kingdom is amazing.
It's Diablo. I'll still defend Forspoken. I think that I enjoyed Forspoken, but like if you find that game for $40, I think that's an easy recommendation for me. I don't know. People just gonna like hate on it, but I've enjoyed that immensely. Like I don't know. Like I'm just saying. Like I also played Vampire Survivors this year, where I skipped it last year. Phenomenal. So I don't know, man. Like it's been a really, really good year in terms of gaming, and I think honestly it's just going to keep getting better. I feel bad for all the game of the years, because I do feel like no matter what, Tears of the Kingdom will take it, because I feel like there is a Nintendo bias, but I would really love to see a Final Fantasy game come in and get that title, outside of like best community or best music, no, like literally take take it as, you know, what they've done and what they've invested in it. So time will tell, and we will see. Anyway, guys, I'm going to end broadcast over on the YouTube side of things. It means I'm just going to sit here and wave it out. Chris will continue to be alive over here.
Died.
And we got him killed by our outro. So that's great.
This is why you don't play hardcore.
Yeah, I know. Well, I've seen so many things like a streamer fell asleep on hardcore. I was like, oh, dude, that sucks.
I watched a hardcore WoW player. His chat talked him into doing a reaction video, and he died while reacting to somebody else dying. So like he was watching a video of somebody dying in hardcore, and then he died, and it was just like, and he's like, why did I do that? And I was like, I don't know. You could have just hearthed. Like, it's just what a silly reason to die.
All right, cool. I'm